Hi, everyone. This is 𝗵𝗲𝗶𝘀. Thank you very much for your interest in my PFO stories. And thank you very much also for all your questions. And let me try to answer each and every one of them. Before anything else, I would just like to be very clear that I will only provide you answers based on my personal experience and my personal knowledge of PFO and DCS that I personally experienced. First question is, what could be possible symptoms? How did you recognize it? My symptoms apparently related to PFO was migraine and ocular migraine. So in migraine has, I've experienced it since I was a child. And when I had migraine, I had it for 2 to 3 days. And I would just stay in bed. I would just curl up under, under the blanket because I was very light sensitive. And when the pain was too much, I would also resort to vomiting. And there has been several instances in the past when my migraine or the pain was unbearable. I would be brought to the hospital for stronger medication to help me with the pain. I also experienced ocular migraine wherein I would see stars, I would see rainbows, I would see bursts of lights, I would see dots. So what happens is when I focus my eyes on something, I would just see stars, rainbows, and everything else. There were some instances wherein I also lost my peripheral vision. So I would have to turn my head, to see something. But then again, those were the things that I learned that could have been related to PFO, which I only researched about after my diagnosis. I did not experience any headache, migraine that was related to diving. But ocular migraine, yes, I experienced that even immediately after diving, like, getting on the surface and the stars were there and the rainbows were there, which again, was not able to relate to DCS because I had it for the longest time. There's a question about the shame of admitting that one has DCS. I went through that. The shame was the one that kept me from admitting that my symptoms were possibly DCS. So the shame made me be in denial of what I could be experiencing. Okay, why is there shame? Um, Going through this feeling of shame is not unique to me. When I posted my story about my PFO, there were a lot of people who reacted about, going through the same thing, that they felt shame. That's the reason why they were in denial. It's because there is this misconception or there is this assumption that if you have DCS, it's because you were reckless. You don't know what you're doing, that you made a mistake. Okay, so I kept on going to Google to check my symptoms, and I was validating my being in denial because I was covering up the shame. And it seems that in also the diving community, when there is one who possibly had DCS, some people whisper about it. Oh, she had DCS. Oh, she had bends or whatever. It's as if this person is not, qualified to dive or do not deserve to be diving. And the shame is real. I battled with it. That's why maybe I've been having DCS symptoms for a long time, but it was only when, it was painful. It was, I was scared for myself already that I finally consulted a doctor, finally got the help I needed. And now I try my best to at least educate people I know, people I dive with, by opening up my story. not necessarily about PFO alone, but also having DCS. You know, I'm not saying it's normal to have DCS, but it's also not abnormal. You know, it could be it could still be very rare, but um, it's okay if there is something unusual after the dive. It's okay to share it with someone, and you know, or get help immediately. Again, call Dan, send a tweet to Dan. They reply to tweets. We have hyperbaric. When you're a diver, you should have a hyperbaric on your speed dial. That is a must. You know, I have a good relationship with my hyperbaric doctor. So any condition I have, I still tell him about it and ask him if, you know, it would somehow be affecting my dive. It's a must. You know, it's like when you have kids, you have to have a pediatrician, you know. Have a hyperbaric doctor in your contact list, and be sure to ask a question, you know, post a question on social media. But then again, if there is an incident after diving, if there is something unusual after diving, there is no shame in getting O2. There is no shame in going to the chamber. I think, you know, we scuba dive, and part of our life right now is the risk that comes with scuba diving, which is DCS. So it is what it is. And people also from the scuba diving committee should remove the stigma of divers who had DCS or the potential DCS. Me personally, it was because of my PFO. I was religiously, you know, following my computer to the point that I replaced my dive computer with a more conservative one, because I learned that the first dive computer I had was a bit aggressive, and then so I replaced it with a more conservative one. That was even prior to PFO, discovering my PFO. I just wanted to be conservative. I just wanted to be on the safe side. Right now, I still do the same. And if I went to 𝗵𝗏𝗃 recently, and there was a welt on my left eye, and it was obviously a marine animal. It was caused by, looks like a jellyfish, but it caused me some anxiety. So what I did, I approached the instructor and I asked him, "Is this skin bends?" And then he's a dive instructor and also the operations manager of the boat. And then he said no. He was very confident. "Don't worry, it's not skin bends." And then eventually I had O2 treatment, because O2 was there, and because having O2 would also address my anxiety and would also address you know, the happiness of my 𝗵𝗏𝗃 trip. So again, please remove the stigma. You know, I'm calling on all divers. Remove the stigma attached to having DCS. You get DCS even at, you know, a 10-meter, 15-meter dive. And sometimes it can be unexplained. I've read stories of DCS that people could not explain why. There was one story wherein the only thing he did was to blow his nose aggressively before the dive. And that was the only reason or potential reason he thinks that may have caused his DCS. So he didn't make a mistake. It just happened. So I hope that sharing my story and other people who have, other divers who have shared their story of PFO or DCS would help remove the stigma and would somehow normalize the discussion of having had DCS without any shame. Because most of us didn't do anything wrong. It's just that some of us who may or may not have PFO are predisposed to having DCS. So another question is, why did you decide to go to a hyperbaric doctor? Had you experienced symptoms of DCS before? The decision to see a hyperbaric doctor was because it was so obvious already that the symptoms that I was experiencing were obviously dive related. So initially, I was being treated by a gastroenterologist for dyspepsia, but despite the medication and the treatment, I was still having symptoms. And again, right after diving. So it was very obvious that it was high time for me to see a hyperbaric doctor. And the other question is, had you experienced symptoms of DCS before? Okay. Whenever there was an incident after diving, I kept on going to Google and checking on the symptoms of DCS. So the textbook symptoms were fatigue, joint and muscle pains, clouded thinking, numbness, weakness, paralysis, rash, and poor coordination of the body. I did not experience anything that was that would have told me that I had DCS. Even the symptom on my stomach, because there was no rashes. There was just a feeling of pain, and the area was very, very warm. It's very hot to the touch. And initially, when I consulted a dive instructor who was my buddy then, I told him about it. And he said that it could just be my wetsuit, or it could just be my belt from my BCD. So no, I didn't know that I was experiencing DCS, and I was still unsure, of course, until the time that I decided to consult a hyperbaric doctor. So the next question is, how do you go about finding a hyperbaric doctor? So I did some research. I posted on local Facebook scuba pages here in the Philippines, and I also reached out to friends in scuba diving, and then they referred me to people they know. That was how I met my hyperbaric doctor, Dr. Jojo Bernardo. The other way of looking at it, which I learned eventually, is actually reaching out to Dan. Dan has a list of accredited doctors, and even I think there was even if I remember correctly, there's even a phone number where you can call and ask for where you can find your hyperbaric doctors. I am not sure if it's on the Dan website, but you can email them. They're very responsive. So I think that would be one of the quickest way to get a recommendation of a hyperbaric doctor. Another question. I am a fellow PFO diver and haven't had it closed. I haven't had any issues yet. My PFO is very small. Do you have any advice for the decision? My advice would be to consult with your hyperbaric doctor, to consult with a cardiologist, and also to reach out to Dan. Dan was very helpful when I was researching on PFO, because my decision to have it closed were, a combination of consultation with doctors. I think I had 8 doctors consulted at that time, and also reaching out to Dan. And I really did a lot of research before coming up with a decision to close it. PFO, I don't know if the right term is degree, but PFO differs from every person. So mine required closing for me to be able to continue diving safely. But I've heard that, yes, some continue to dive without having their PFO closed. So let me just end this answer with, please dive safely. And I think much more conservatively, considering that you know that you have that condition. Next question is, how do you feel now to dive? Are you confident? Of course, going back to the water, um, there was a lot of anxiety. My anxiety was through the roof. And it helped a lot that my doctors were very thorough in making me go through health checks, battery of tests, actually not related anymore to the PFO closure, because right a few weeks after the PFO closure, it was already established that the procedure was successful. However, there was a decision by my hyperbaric doctor to ensure that, I was still healthy to go back to diving. So the other battery of tests were really unrelated to PFO. And knowing that I went through the proper clearances actually helped a lot in the decision to go back to the water, as to when I could go back to the water. But of course, there was a lot of anxiety and a lot of insecurities and a lot of fears when I went diving the first time. And I approached it like I was an open water student, checking my gear, making sure I still knew how to set up my gear. I still knew how to do safety checks. I would remember my training as a rescue diver. And of course, the worry was there when I finally went to the water. Um, I was just so anxious, but when I was already in the water, the experience was magical. It was a revalidation that I made the right decision to have my PFO closed, and that diving is a passion. Being in the water is, part of who I am. The anxiety is still there. Every now and then I would, I would make sure that I was not feeling any symptoms, because I read somewhere that when you've had DCS before, you're predisposed to having it again. But then again, that information I haven't really validated with that. So I'm not sure if it's right. I am naturally an anxious person, and I think a healthy amount of anxiety during diving is healthy, and helps you to be safe. So am I confident? I love being in the water. Um, I could say that yes, I'm confident now to dive again. After multiple dives, I've done multiple dives already after the PFO closure. Um, if related to my PFO, yes, I am very sure that it was successfully closed. And if there are any incidents PFO related, I know that I will not have them anymore. So yeah, I hope I answered your question.